Let's talk about the transfer of energy. Conduction. Conduction is the transfer of energy by contact. Thermal conduction transfers energy through a material, but the materials must be touching. Thermal energy is always transferred from a warm to a cold area. It's very difficult to transfer energy from a cold to a warm area. In fact, it doesn't really happen. Making popcorn the old-fashioned way, in a pan or a stove, is an example of conduction. Heat is transferred from the pan to the oil in the pan, and the heat from the oil is then transferred to the popcorn kernels. Just like the air by the Earth's surface is heated. Another example of conduction is a hot pavement. Let's say it's a very warm, sunny day, and you walk barefoot outside. What's going to happen? Your feet are going to be heated by conduction heating. Your feet get warm and hot because you're touching the hot pavement. This is a perfect example of conduction heating. Convection is another example of energy transfer. Convection is the transfer of thermal energy by the circulation or movement of a liquid or gas. Because cool air is more dense than warm air, cool air always sinks. And because warm air is less dense, it always rises. Have you ever been on a bunk bed? During the night, you may notice that the person sleeping on the top of the bunk bed may feel warmer than the person sleeping at the bottom of the bunk bed. This is because the warm air rises and the cool air sinks. The rising and falling of air causes a circular movement and is called a convection current. Another example of a convection current is making popcorn, but this time not the old-fashioned way. Making popcorn in a popcorn popper is an example. The warm air makes the kernels expand and pop, just like the radiation from the sun heats the air in the atmosphere. The warm air rises, allowing cool air to move underneath it. Let's look at this picture. This is an example of convection currents. Notice that the warm surface of the land heats up the air, and the air rises. However, the higher the air rises, the colder it then becomes due to altitude. Once the air gets cold, it then sinks back to the surface. Because cold air sinks and warm air rises, this convection current continues. Now let's look at the convection current within this room. Air warms and becomes less dense due to the radiator. The warm air rises, and as it rises, it eventually will cool, especially when it gets close to the window. Once the air cools, it becomes more dense and it sinks. And it stays cool until the radiator once again heats it to rise again. Let's talk about the last form of energy transfer, radiation. The Earth receives energy from the sun by radiation. Radiation is the transfer of energy as electromagnetic waves. The Earth receives about 2 billionths of the sun's energy. This is enough to drive the weather cycle and make the Earth habitable. Making popcorn in the microwave is an example of radiation. The kernels are heated by radiation from the microwave, causing them to pop and give off heat. Let's look at this example of energy transfer on the Earth. The sun heats the ground through radiation. Once the ground becomes heated, it heats the air above it through conduction. Because the air above the ground is heated, convection takes hold. The warm air rises. Once the air rises high in the sky, it starts to cool, and the air will then fall to the ground until it is heated once more.